Good evening and welcome back to the studio. I'm Catherine Wilson from Queenie Quilts, and today is month 1 of the Philanthropy Challenge for 2024. So I talked a little bit about this in a video in late December. I think it got published. That in 2024 I'm really focusing on using up things in my stash. And part of that is sending stuff off to my philanthropy group. So this month's group, they're looking for 50-inch quilts that are good for wheelchairs and for an elderly home. So we're going to be making stacked coins, and you'll be able to find the pattern for stacked coins down in the bottom in the description box as a link. It's a PDF. You can also get it on my website. So let's get started. So the first thing to know about this is it uses about 1.5 yards of a background. Now in this background, it's a white with a very small, it's actually a little ladybug print. But for the one we're going to make for the video, we're going to use 1.5 yards of this Hoffman print that's in my stash. So we're gonna use that. And then I'm going to use this 20-piece Bally Poppy. So you can use half of a Bally Pop. You can use the leftovers you have in your stash. For this one, I used half of a full jelly roll. For the one we're going to make today, I'm going to use half. Oh, I'm going to use a whole of a 20-piece one. So I'm just going to get it opened up, and then we're going to do some work. So see how complicated this is going to be. You can never do this well on camera, but there you go. So the first thing we're going to do is open this guy up. Why are they always harder to open when you're on camera? It's sort of embarrassing, actually. All right, so here we go. There are 40 pieces. It's primarily purple and blue. That's kind of why I picked it. It kind of matches the colors that are in this guy. So those colors kind of all show up. So there's only 2 things we really have to be careful about. Number 1 is we don't want the darkest colors to be these end ones because they'll disappear, right? So we need to make sure this guy is light or medium. And then we just have to be careful that we separate accordingly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out 4 of the 20. Doesn't really matter which 4, but you want to pull out 4 of the 20. So I'm going to actually pull out the 4 dark ones, the super dark ones, the ones I know I'm going to need to bury. It doesn't really matter which ones you pull out. You just need to pull them out and set them aside. So there's 4. I'm just going to set them aside here on the side of my table. Then I'm going to take the remaining ones and I'm going to cut each of them in half. So I'm going to use my rotary cutter here, and I'm really just going to cut them at the fold. And the nice thing about these is they're kind of all lined up, so it's a quick job. So I'm just going to separate those at the fold, kind of a couple at a time. And then once I've separated them, got one more here I need to do. So once I've got them separated into 2 pieces, so each one of these became 2, right? So they're 2.5 by 20 inches, essentially, 20-ish inches. And then here's another one that I've separated, right? I'm then going to put them together with other ones in the group, but not the same ones. So we're really just making, we have 16 strips here, and we're going to make 32. So we have 32, we have 16 full strips, which means we have 32 half strips. We're going to put them into 16 pairs. So I'm going to make a pair of this one. But then for the other piece of this purple, I'm going to use a different print. And really all I'm doing is I'm giving myself extra options So I'm just gonna lay these out and then take them to my sewing machine, and I'm gonna sew along this long line with my 1/4 inch strip, or my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm just gonna sew right along here with a 1/4 inch. And then I will meet you back here to talk about next steps. All right, we're back from sewing, and I have all of my pairs here. So I have actually sewn them on the long side, and then I'm actually pressed all of these at this point. So it doesn't matter which way you press, so towards the dark, towards the light, it doesn't matter. They aren't actually going to match up with anything, so you don't need to worry about it. But I've got mine all pressed here. And now what I'm going to do, I've also, while we were off camera, I have cut my 4 that we set aside. I've cut them in half as well. So cut them all into 2 pieces like this. So I am going to just take a couple of these, 8 of them to be exact, so half of them, and go and put these on. Now, the one thing I'm going to do is, if you have, like this one is very much a light and a dark, I'm going to put since these are all dark, I'm going to put them next to the dark one, so that I don't make both ends of these 8 dark. So I'm really just going to take my pile, and the first 8 that I pull are going to be the ones I do. You don't have to be really super picky here, just because of the way this pattern works. You're really just trying to get it done. So I'm going to go with these sewn and pressed, and then I'll meet you back here. Hi, and welcome back. So I'm back from the iron end sewing. So I've got 8 of these that are groups of 3, and I have 8 of them that are in groups of 2. Look like this. So I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see me from the top and show you what I'm going to do next. Walk through the next couple of steps. So I'll be right back. All right, hi guys, we're back. So I have in front of me one of the 2s, and what we're going to do here is cut it into 2.5 inch segments. So I have 2 rulers here. This is the method that I like best for trimming these, or for squaring them up. So I'm going to use this 6.5 line. I'm going to line it up with my sewn line. And then I'm going to butt this left-hand ruler up against it. And then I'm going to lightly move this one away. And then cut here. Okay. So I'm just going to throw that scrap away. It's not really big enough for me to do anything with. Now, if it were 1.5 inches, I would keep it. I'd put it in my 1.5 inch bin and do something with it later. So, and then from here, we're just going to trim on the 2.5 inch line. So we're going to line up at 2.5. Again, line that up on the straight and cut these. All right. So depending on a couple of factors, you're going to get 7 or potentially 8 of these cuts from your segment. Now, those determining factors have to do with how long your actual strips were to start with. So were they a full 18 inches or 21 inches? The second factor is how well they lined up at the starting point, which these ones were pretty close because this is where I started. And whether or not they were the same length. So if you happen to get 2 long ones together, you might get that 8th one out. I have found that in general, I have gotten 7. So, but we'll go with whatever we get. And about halfway through, I will reset that line, get it to make sure that it's straight. I just want to make sure these don't get wonky. They don't start to lean one way or the other. So that's 5. This one is 6. And that's going to give me 7. So there we go. Now, I'm going to do the exact same thing with these guys that have 3 pieces. So literally the exact same thing. I'm going to put it nice and flat. I'm going to move those out of the way just so I don't. I'm going to pick one of the lines. I always find it easier on the one where it has the most color change to line that line up exactly. Trim to create my starting line, and away I go. So I'm going to get all of these cut, and then I will come back and show you the next steps. Hi there, and welcome back. So I have got all of my pieces cut. So I've got a pile of 2s and a pile of 3s. And now it's time to put them together into strips of 5. So they need to be in 5s like this. And there are 2 components you need to watch out for. Number 1 is you don't want these super darks to be out here. And number 2, as much as possible, you want to not repeat the same fabric in each grouping. So you wouldn't want to put this one here, right? Because it's got that blue. But you could put any of these other ones, right? So that one could work. And then once I've matched them up, I put them in this pile. Now, as much as possible, I also want to try not to make every one of these have this one on it. So I want to pick other things from the pile that would be good candidates. So that one would be a good candidate. It's got a different here. It's similar there, but it's different enough. So you just kind of want to try to get them as random as possible. At some point, you may not have a choice. You may have to have something that you already have. And that's okay, right? So at some point, if you get to the point that you've got one of everything like this one I already have, right? So I'll just dig in my pile a little farther. Oh, I can do this one. I don't have him yet. So now that one's good. And then I'll just keep going. At some point, you will not be able to get away with it. And that's okay as well. So you'll have multiples that are the same. And that's okay. You just want to spread them out as much as possible. And again, this is a philanthropy quilt. It doesn't have to be perfect. So have fun with it. Try out new things. Find lots of different combinations that work and do what works for you. So I'm going to spend a little time separating these out, coming out with as many individual separations as I can, and then go take them in piles to the sewing machine and sew them. So I'm going to sew them on this edge with a 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to press them. And then I'll meet you back here to show you the next step. All right, I'm back from the sewing machine. I've sewn all my 2s to my 3s and pressed them. So now I have 5-piece groupings. Now, as you can see, it doesn't really matter which way you press. I've got a couple going to the left. So these 3 go to the left. This one goes to the right. That's fine. These aren't going to touch anything, so you don't need to worry about which way they press. What you do need to worry about is that they're the right size. So they need to be 2.5 by 10.5. And if they're not, you need to trim these ends. So my 2.5s were fine. Some of mine were a little bit fat on this side, which essentially means either these were, because these were pre-cut, either they were a little bit bigger than 2.5 when they came in the package, or my seams were a little bit scant. Either way's fine. We just want to make sure they aren't too big. So first thing I do is I check them. I like to use this ruler. It's kind of my favorite size. It's 8.5 by 12. So, and this one is from Omnigrid, but it really doesn't matter. You could just as easily use a 10.5 inch square ruler. That would be really easy and good to square them up with, because you would be trimming it to the edge of the ruler. So for me, I'm just going to do a quick check here, put this on 10.5, and I can see that I've got stuff hanging out here. So I want to split that difference. I don't want it all to be on one side or the other that I trim it off of. So I'm just going to do a quick check here and line this up at 2 1/4. Right? So if I line this first seam up with 2 1/4, that's what it should measure. And I'm going to trim just that little bit off. I'm really just sliver trimming that little piece off. And then check this one and do the same. So 2 1/4, which is right where that 60 is. So, and on this one, I'm trimming off even less. So just really trimming threads, to be honest. And then I'm going to put my ruler back down and recheck that for 10.5. And it's still a little bit bigger, so I'm going to retrim that. So in reality, it's probably a little bit bigger than the 2.5 it needs to be in all these places. So these will finish at 2, but in doing that, you make sure that this is going to fit. And because it doesn't touch anything else, it's not going to be clear to most people that they're not quite right. So that's how I'm going to go with those. It is important, though, that these are trimmed to 10.5, because otherwise your next pieces are going to be too big. So this piece is 10.5 by 2.5. So I cut them in a 10.5-inch strip. So I cut 5 10.5-inch strips to give me 75 2.5 by 10.5-inch segments. So I cut them by the 10.5-inch strip first, and then I subcut that into 2.5-inch segments. And now what I'm going to do is put these right sides together like that, and I'm going to sew. And in the magic of television, I have a few I've already done. So here's one right here. So I have trimmed it. I've sewn it and pressed it, and now it's ready to go. So I'm going to put 25 of these in a pile. So you're going to put 25 just like this, that have 1 2.5 by 10.5 and 5 2.5-inch squares on them. You're going to put those in a pile. And then I'm going to make 25 more. And they're going to be in another pile. So these 25, I'm now going to add something to. I'm actually going to put a second one of these. So I'm going to put these on the other side and sew them along this on the 1/4 inch. So that's going to give me 25 that have doubles and 25 that have triples. So once you have that, you'll then sew those 2 blocks together so that you have a 3-part block and a 2-part block, and sew them together on this line and press them. Again, it's not going to matter which way you press. You can see I pressed mine all different kinds of ways depending on what was easiest at the time. I usually will press to whichever, if they're not going to match, I'll press whichever way lays flattest. So these I pressed out, this one I pressed out, and this one I pressed in towards the small pieces. But basically you're going to have, for this block, 3 pieces that are the 10.5 by 2.5 and 10 what are essentially 2.5-inch squares sewn together. So that's this block for this quilt, and I'll show it to you up on the wall next. All right, so now that you've got your 25 blocks that look like this, right? So in a horizontal position, the stripes are going this way. We're gonna put them up on the board. So I've already got this one behind me set up. So the first block, goes this way, horizontal. Oops. Then you're going to flip it over and do the next one vertically like this, right? And continue that pattern. So horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal for row 1. So this one starts in the horizontal position. And then for row 2, it starts in the vertical position. So it starts going this way. And you do the same thing. And basically what it does is it creates that checkerboard effect. And it makes them look really random. Now, this one has a dark background. And it looks even more random because it is a dark background. On a light background with dark strips, it looks more linear. So I hope you enjoyed today. I hope you will enjoy making this quilt. Nice and simple, fast, which is what I always want for a philanthropy item. So it's a great quilt. It's called Stacked Coins. You'll find the instructions in the bottom. There are instructions for making it different sizes. So this one is 50 by 50. Once you have your binding on, it'll be about 51. But if you wanted to make it in a twin or a queen, really whatever size you want, pretty much there's how many blocks you need to make in the bottom of the pattern. So make sure you check that out if you want to make this bigger. And if you make it bigger, let me know. I'd love to see it. All right. Have a great day. Hope you enjoy your sewing room today, and I'll see you next time.